Hey everybody, it's Rob Appel from Michael Miller Fabrics and welcome to another Making It Fun episode. I am super excited you are here. Just recently I was asked a fabulous question about how do you get started, and I thought, let's get started. All joking aside, I actually did. I received a fantastic email, and I always say, hey, if you've got a question about quilting or sewing, please send me an email, rob@michaelmillerfabrics.com. Of course, I can't answer all of the questions, but I'll do my best to answer the ones that I can. And sometimes I'll find a question like today's question that was so important that I answer it for all of us. And the question read something like this. You know, Rob, I've bought all the books, I've bought all the patterns, I've seen all the videos, I've got a bunch of fabric, I've got a bunch of tools, I've got a sewing machine all fired up and ready to go. But where do I start? Do I start with the fabric? Do I start with the blocks? How do I get past the what do I do phase? And there's two answers I try to provide. I try to provide, and I will for all of us today, provide a fabric-based answer on contrast and color picking and fabrics and all of that kind of stuff. But the other answer, the most important answer I can provide for anybody, including yours truly, is the best way to finish a quilt is to start it. And the best way to start a quilt is to understand that there is no real wrong answers in quilting. Of course, you're going to have some quilt designs or blocks that you're going to like better than others, and that's how we're going to talk about fabric choices. That's what today's video is all about, fabric choices. But more importantly, I need to remind all of us that quilting is an art form. It should be about experimentation. You have to understand, I've been making quilts for probably close to 20 years, and I've gotten as many wrong as I've gotten right. Please, don't spend so much time concerned about making a masterpiece quilt when you're just learning. We've got to learn to walk before we can run, right? And so please don't be over intimidated by all of the information that's out there. Simply focus on what you like, and that was my answer to this person that emailed in, was go through the list of quilts you've been gathering, go through all of that inspiration that you see out there, and find what it is you like in each quilt, and make a list, and that list will vary. Maybe you like applique in one quilt, maybe you like the color explosion in another quilt, something like that. But with that same list of quilts, go back and simply look and say, are these high contrast quilts or are these low contrast quilts? And if you're like me, I like wow quilts. I like high impact, high contrast quilts. And that comes a lot from fabric choices and fabric placement. And that's the answer I want to provide for all of you. However, I've got great fabrics here, but don't you think it's time we go on a field trip? I do. As a matter of fact, my good friend Mike here has a cousin named Mike. I know, crazy, right? And he works at a quilt shop in Wisconsin. What do you say we all take a road trip over to Wisconsin and get expert advice from Mike in a quilt shop? Let's do it. What do you think? All right, little buddy, let's do this. Hey, it is! It's Mike's cousin Mike here in Racine, Wisconsin. I'm in Sew and Save, and we're going to get some expert advice from some of the fantastic folks here in this quilt shop on how to pick color and fabric for your quilts. Come on in. Let's meet Karen. She's awesome. And there she is. There's my dear friend Karen.
Welcome to Sew and Save.
This is awesome. Hey, I love your display of fabric, by the way.
Thank you. This is Michael Miller Lane.
Yes, it is Michael Miller Lane. It is awesome, and all these great textures, which is going to make my sample conversation all the better. Hey, can I hand you the camera while I show these folks what I was talking about real quick?
Absolutely.
Okay, you got it. Here we go, gang.
Am I good? There you are.
Yeah. I made a few samples before I left home because I really wanted to share with you all the basic concepts of choosing color and picking fabrics real quick. And the number one thing I can teach you, and it's probably the only thing I can really teach you, is there's no right or wrong answer. And you really can't do this by guesswork. You have to sew the blocks together. So I made some half square triangles, and half square triangles, the way I make them, are super simple. I take two squares, I sew around all four sides, right? And then I cut them so that I can cut them on the diagonal, so I have 4 units, and those units make what we call a half square triangle. Of course, you're going to press them to the dark side. And then I wanted to make these same star blocks. So each of these 4 blocks I'm going to show you are the same, using different fabrics so you can kind of get an idea. So before we dive into fabrics, there's one last homework assignment I have for you all, and that is I want you to go back through the list of quilts that have inspired you over the past few years and look at them all and write down what has inspired you about each quilt. It could be the applique, it could be the color, it could be the blocks, it could be the quilting, it can be anything. Secondly, I want you to go back to that same list, those same quilts, and just write, are they high contrast or low contrast fabric choices? See if you lean one way or the other. I bet you can guess I'm a high contrast fabric guy. I'm super energetic and I want my quilts to do the same. So for my starting block, I tried to choose something that I considered high contrast, a solid versus our hash dot or a medium texture, so that you could see the star I was trying to create. So it's two fabrics, basically a light and a medium. This block here, though, I have three colors, a light, a medium, and a dark, and because I placed the dark around the outside edge, you actually see the star better, at least in my opinion, than you did in the high contrast block. So again, experimenting with fabric is the best way to learn this stuff. A lot of times we also talk about low contrast or working in like monochromatic so that we have a lot of shades in the same color family so that we can then create a block that is more subtle, or if you're a low contrast kind of quilt maker. So even though I use a bright color here, like this orange, this warm tone, it still comes back together and makes a low contrast block. You don't see as much of the star, but you can put this together very nicely and have a beautiful quilt. And if you needed a little more energy, you could always put in some sashing as well, and a higher contrast sashing, a white, a black, or a complementary color such as a blue or a purple would bring this thing boom into outer space, or 3 cups of coffee Rob Appel style, right? And then this one here, I added in some extra sheen, some of the fairy frost with the glitz in here, and some different colorways. You still see the perimeter, but my darkest color in my eye is now kind of in the center, so you can see what happens just by rearranging the different positions of the different lights, mediums, and darks. And by doing that, you have a good example, but you still don't know what your quilt's going to look like. So to find out what your quilt's going to look like, I'll often take out my old cellular phone here, take a photograph of it, and then I go from here to an app that probably you all have because you follow me hopefully on Instagram, and that's the Instagram layout app. And so when I do that, oops, I just put it away, you can even see on some of these blocks like this how cool it turns out. You can get a cool tiling effect. And then the other thing I'll just recommend is take a picture with a little bit of background, black or white around it, so you can audition for sashing as well as you can crop your photo so you have 2 photos from the same photo. It's just another efficiency trick. So at any rate, that's my tips on learning a little bit about fabric. Is really, it's a doing thing versus a thinking thing. And it's playing with lights, mediums, and darks and different scales to try to bring the block to life. And the amount of life is based on how much contrast you really like. So that's my tip. Now I'm going to embarrass Karen and ask her to give me the exact same info. Well, let me trade places with Karen.
Okay. Hey, everybody. We have a lot of people come into the shop every day, and the hardest thing for them to do is pick out color for quilts. And it's hard for us to sometimes help people with color as well, because sometimes people just don't know sometimes you just don't know what you want until you see it. So if somebody comes in and they don't know what they want, always, always, always come into the quilt shop and ask. We are here to help you. This is what we do. This is what we love to do. That's why we're here. Because anytime I can get out of the back room and not have to do bookwork and help somebody pick out a quilt, I'm in my happy place.
Amen.
But at any rate, so a lot of times what I ask customers to do is kind of walk around the shop if they don't know what they want and pick out maybe 1 or 2 fabrics that they like. And then a lot of times it'll be a focal fabric, something that has a lot of different colors or a pattern. And then we go from there and we build off of that. And we'll build off of color. We might add some more texture. Do you like something bright? Do you not? And then we just experiment until people are hopefully happy with their choice. And that's kind of our idea of what we kind of try to do here and help everybody go home with happy fabric and happy quilt patterns to get started.
Oh, I love your answer. Now, I'm also going to say the reasons we love to come to these local quilt shops is because of all of this variety in here, right?
Absolutely.
And so what I like to do is I like to grab fabrics off your shelf and put them and audition them with the squares. And so you can see the different ways that happens. And that I think is one of the benefits of coming to a local quilt shop where all the inventory is and you can really audition it because fabric changes and color really reacts to the colors around it. So I'm going to put you on the spot for a few more seconds before we wrap up this video. Let's grab a few colors and they can be any fabrics you want. Let's play with this low contrast block. Let's see what we can do with that low contrast block.
Let's pop this out a little bit.
You got it.
Oh, well, our dots are way over here.
Okay.
But let's grab a dark dot and see what that looks like with it. And then even like just another dark red.
Okay.
And see what happens when we put two different colors with it. And then let's look at something that's light. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just open up the bolt and kind of lay the block on the corner. And then you can kind of see how it's going to react with that.
Oh, yes.
A little bit. So that gives you a lot of contrast. This is also going to give you a lot of contrast. Look at that.
A completely
Look at
different effect. And I don't know if you got to see it in your eye, but Karen, in the camera, all the red washed out of the block against the blue. And it was very predominant on the red. What you grabbing over there?
Something kind of blah. You can see what it. I don't want to do this one.
That's a designer right there. Toss
I don't
it.
want to do that. But let's just like throw fairy frost in there, and just a light fairy frost, so you can see what happens when you put a light color next to that. Then, and look at the sheen on these fairy frosts. Aren't they awesome? I should kind of cover up that so you don't see that blue and stuff. But look at how that looks on there.
Yeah.
That looks like sherbet. Good enough to eat.
Mm-hmm.
But that's very pretty too.
And it pops out the corners of the blocks
It does, yeah. So depending on what color you put on there, will draw out different colors within the block.
Right, and that's why having a theme fabric to choose from and work with is also such a nice choice.
It is.
You're
absolutely,
awesome.
And we have lots to choose from.
We do. Okay, everybody, thanks again. And I really want to say thanks to Karen for letting me come in, and Cousin Mike for being out here in Wisconsin. Super awesome, super awesome. Thank you all for being here.
And thank you for supporting your local quilt shops. See you soon.
Great job. Nice.
Done.
Okay, let's go have a party.
Yeah. Now the fun will begin.